From the studio that has won no awards whatsoever comes the podcast that should have already been canceled. Welcome to another episode of Have You Read This? A podcast for bookworms, lovers of sarcasm, and those dangerously close to overdosing on caffeine. Load up on ibuprofen, because here comes 15 minutes of your life you'll never be able to get back.
All right, so the three of you who listen here on a regular basis, you probably noticed that last month there was only one episode. You might have also noticed that this episode is late because for, like I said, the three of you that pay any kind of attention, a long time ago I said, I think first and third Wednesdays. That obviously didn't happen. I think right around the time that I normally record and edit these things, I got hit with one of the 95 viruses that was going around. I was just coughing. I couldn't stop. And I was coughing so bad that I actually lost my voice. And if you're one of those people that has trouble keeping up, it turns out that not being able to talk actually makes podcasting a little difficult. Now, of course, I wonder if I did an episode where I couldn't talk, would anybody actually notice? So because it irritates me to no end, I wanted to continue a little bit about my rant about some of the garbage that I found while scrolling through some of these groups that I was reading on Facebook. And I don't want to call this one out by name, but let's just say it focuses on one specific genre of books. And I was kind of shocked when I went and looked. It has about 1.5 million members. I guess that kind of makes sense why I see some of the same stuff posted over and over again. People don't go look. But I'm guessing that 90% of the people that post in this group have never heard of Google, and none of them know how to use a search function. Anyway, one of my favorite posts recently was this. It just said, do DNF books count as books read? I didn't finish 6 this year, and I thought, how bad are you trying to reach those reading goals of yours where you're counting stuff that you didn't actually read? And as the end of the year approached, I think that panic set in for a lot of people, not meeting some kind of arbitrary reading goal increased, and they were searching for 12-page books that they could read 38 of them in a day and say that they met their reading challenge so that strangers on Facebook would care. This group was flooded with readers who have no clue how to search for and find books. So instead, they just posted the same thing over and over and over again in this single group. And another favorite post that I saw was one, and it just says something along the lines of, about to start this, any thoughts? And it's a photo of a book cover, which is shared 15 times within the last 4 hours. I mean, can we just not read reviews on Goodreads or wherever, Amazon, wherever you get your books? They all have reviews. I mean, can't you read that and kind of figure out, hey, this is kind of something I would want to read or not? Or at the very minimum, read one of the other 15 posts in the same hour about the book that just showed up. I just don't get it. And if you're someone that posts anything like this, please know people see you the same way they see people that stand up as soon as the plane lands. Everybody hates you. Okay, so if you saw the title, Worst Books of 2024, I saw a handful of videos and podcasts of folks that covered the worst reads of the past year. And I thought about making my own Worst Books of 2024. And I need to take a minute here to explain that if you tuned in for me to talk about all of the books that I hated this year, then you're listening to the wrong episode, because I have absolutely zero interest in ever dedicating an entire episode to bashing an author's work just because it wasn't my cup of tea. I've read books that I didn't like, and even then, I just found it hard to give them a crappy rating, unless it was just absolutely terrible. But I have to respect the effort that someone puts in thinking through a story, writing it, editing, having it published, whether it's through a big company or doing self-publishing, whatever. I mean, you went through all of this effort. And something I might have considered the worst book, it might have been something that somebody else would really love. So this episode is not going to cover anything that I hated. In fact, I actually wanted to mention briefly a short book that I finished towards the end of the year by Brian Evenson titled Father of Lies. And I wrote up an article on this and put it on the website. And I think when I did that, it was really when I wasn't feeling so great and I couldn't talk. And I just, for some reason, felt this pressure to continuously put out content for no apparent reason, which is really dumb. But anyway, this one checks in just under 200 pages, but don't let the shorter length of this story give you the impression that it's not as impactful as a longer novel. The story follows Provost Fox, and I'll spell that one out there because I have a feeling, much like every other episode, that I'm just going to butcher these pronunciation, but it's Fochs. And as you probably already guessed, this guy is basically evil. And this whole book explores the damage that occurs when you have this perverse pedophile who is allowed to hold a position of power over the people that he preys upon. But what I liked about this one was I kind of like it when stories start off with, I don't know, like evidence, or they're telling the stories through just some different, unique type of way. And like this one, we initially see like letters that are back and forth from Fox therapist and the church, and it just sets a tone from the beginning and from the church, in that they plan to protect this guy. We probably ought to clear this up, that this provost isn't some guy with just like a few naughty photos on his computer. He's a violent pedophile predator, and some of this stuff he actually ends up conveying and talking to his therapist about. And obviously the therapist is trying to protect what happens in these sessions, and the church wants it and that kind of thing. But there was one session where the provost describes a dream where he basically strangles and dismembers a young girl in the woods near his house. But obviously it's just a dream that he had, right? And it's no coincidence that a child from his parish is later found murdered and dismembered. So it's soon discovered that these dreams are actual events that have taken place. And rather than throwing this dude under the bus, the church actually works to protect him and cover up any wrongdoing, even going so far as to request and attempt to steal the notes from his therapist, which all this is just kind of crazy. But it's told in such a believable manner. Like you could actually see this as being a documentary series. And as that story unfolded, it continued for me with this I felt it claustrophobic, and I don't know. I was extremely uncomfortable. Shout out to the author, Brian Evenson, because if you can invoke a feeling in somebody with your writing, I think that's a talent. But just reading this, I knew like right from the start, I just had this vibe. Okay, this is not going to end well at all. And everyone in Fox's inner circle, even his wife, everybody's initially in denial, but when confronted with the truth, it's devastating, and it's heartbreaking to see the actions, and I guess some way inactions, that everybody takes. And I kind of wonder, like reading this, I kind of wonder what would you do in this situation? What if it was your spouse? Would you instantly come to their defense, or like you see online so often, oh, just feed them through the wood chipper? Is it really that easy? Like if it's a loved one, a spouse, whatever, can you just instantly discard them? And this guy legitimately is, in his book, he's a monster. There just isn't any other way to describe this aside from just all out evil. For example, when you see this from his point of view, there's sections of it which is told that way. There's this character called Bloody Head that is introduced. Now, is this symbolic of God, or maybe Satan, some higher power that is in his life that's telling him to do these evil things? Or could this be like an alter ego that he's created that helps him somehow justify the stuff that he does? Or is this just a sign of how mentally detached he is from reality, and just further evidence of what a dangerous person he is? And none of those things are really answered. So, and I believe that that's what makes this darker and more depressing, because this guy's just navigating the world, and in his mind, I think that he battles with knowing what he's doing is wrong, but not wanting to get caught, but still needing to feed whatever these terrible desires are. And I'm so glad the author didn't clear this up, because I think leaving it to the reader, that open-endedness, to me, it just makes it darker. I would love also to go into the ending of the book, but kind of make it a policy not to do that kind of thing. And I think that I would love to know, like, if you read this and you start right when you start it, imagine, okay, how is this thing going to wrap up, and see if you're right. Because this is one of those where I actually predicted the ending correctly, which is not to say that I hated it or thought it was, fantastic, whatever. I find it difficult to say that I really enjoyed a book like this, especially considering the subject matter. And I mean, what I mean by when I enjoyed books like Father of Lies is this: Evenson does a superb job at setting the tone and providing enough information for readers to gain just enough insight into these characters, but pulling back enough to allow us to imagine this monster for ourselves. Because, I mean, after all, what's more scary, right? Seeing the monster or not, and then letting our minds kind of run wild. And oftentimes that can be far more frightening. This one's dark. It's depressing. It's not something I would consider a light read. If you're a trigger warning person, I would check all those out. It was just written well. And especially for something under 200 pages, to hit somebody as hard with such few pages, I think is pretty impressive. But it was so well done for me that I went back to Goodreads, and I think I put every one of his books on my TBR. And if you read this and you think, okay, this was really good, and you're wanting something similar, the only thing that I think came to mind to me was Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. There's some, in my mind, some crossover. Both of these books, I think, have endings that readers will appreciate. But at the end of the day, it's hard to say something like, well, if you like this book about an abusive priest, here's a list of 5 other books you'll also enjoy. And so I started a tradition of picking one really long book and making that my first read of the year. And as of today, I think I'm 500 something pages into the count of Monte Cristo. I do have Hog by Samuel Delany arriving in another week or so. I don't know. It depends on the post office and how they handle the weather we've been getting, but that one's been on my radar for a while. And what I've seen online is that is an even more difficult book to get through than something like Cows by Matthew Stokoe. So I don't know, I guess we'll see. But before I tackle that one, I also have Perfume by Patrick Suskind. Hope I'm pronouncing that one right. Another dark read that's been on my list for a while. And then I don't normally do these kind of things, but there was an ad that popped up on Instagram, and it was from an author, Harlan Draper, and he wrote a short book called Roughneck, and it's supposedly set somewhere here in Kentucky. And I thought, why not? So ordered that one from him. So I might tackle that, which would be, reading a book around 100 pages. It would be a nice break from the 1,200 pages that's the count of Monte Cristo. So I don't know. I'm not sure which one I'll read first, but hopefully some of those will qualify as a future episode to bore you with. Until next time.
I hope the Xanax lasted you through all of that nonsense. Since you are still here, it would give my undies a tingle if you drop a 5-star review. Follow Have You Read This podcast on Instagram, or I will beat you to death with my walker. Now get me out of here and get me my back pills.